On her birthday, my 10-year-old daughter woke up in an empty house. The whole family drove off to a luxury vacation, leaving her behind. "Family is everything," they posted. I didn't cry. I took action. 3 days later, their lives started to unravel. I came home expecting the usual birthday chaos. Not the fun kind either. The stressful kind. The "where are the candles? Who touched the frosting? Why is there a suitcase in the hallway?" kind. The kind where you trip over someone's flip-flop and then pretend it didn't hurt because you're trying to be a cheerful, functional adult. Instead, I walked into nothing. No voices, no footsteps, no clatter of bags. Not even my husband Ethan asking where his sunglasses were, as if I personally managed the location of his face. Just silence. At first, I stood there longer than I want to admit, like maybe the house was buffering, like if I waited a second the sound would load in. It didn't. My eyes flicked automatically to the little signs of life I always noticed without meaning to. The spot where shoes usually piled up like a small, disrespectful mountain. The hallway hook where my mother-in-law Linda insisted we hang coats properly while she herself hung them wherever gravity allowed. The counter where someone always left a mug and called it rinsing. Empty. 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 And I did have this moment, this stupid, sharp moment where my brain went, "Oh, okay." They left. Without me. All of them. Including my daughter Sophie. It didn't even make sense. That's the part that makes it so horrifying. Your brain doesn't start with logic in a moment like that. It starts with fear and then tries to build a house around it. I walked farther in, slowly, like I was trespassing in my own home. I called out, "Hello?" and it sounded too loud, like my voice didn't belong there. I moved down the hall, glancing at the coat hooks again as if coats might have magically reappeared out of guilt. Nothing. I scanned the living room. No Gary, no Linda, no Ethan, no sign of travel bags, no sign of life. And then Sophie walked out. The birthday girl. She was already awake, hair rumpled, pajamas twisted, and her face. Her face was wrong. Not in a dramatic, movie-crying way. In a quiet way. In that stiff way kids get when they're trying so hard to keep it together that the effort shows on their skin. Her eyes were shiny. Her mouth was tight. Her hands were clenched around her phone like it was the only solid thing in the room. She was holding back tears. "Sophie?" I said, and my voice came out too careful. "Hey, what's going on?" She didn't answer right away. She just stood there very still, like if she moved she might fall apart. Then I tried again, because that's what mothers do when their insides are quietly turning to ice. "Where is everyone?" Sophie's throat bobbed. She blinked hard, like she was trying to push the tears back up into her brain, and then she said, small and flat, "They left." I stared at her. It's weird how your body reacts to certain sentences. My chest tightened like I'd been braced for impact without knowing it. "What do you mean, they left?" I asked. "Sophie, what are you talking about?" She swallowed again. "I came out," she said, and her voice shook even though she was trying to keep it steady. "And nobody was here. I didn't know where anyone was. I didn't know if you—" She cut herself off and breathed in, sharp. "I didn't know what was happening." I took a step closer. "Okay," I said, because I needed a word that wasn't panic. "Okay, how do you know they left?" Sophie looked down at her phone. Her fingers tightened around it. "Because I checked," she whispered. I looked at my phone, and I saw something. Then she held it out to me, and there it was. A bright photo. Too bright, too cheerful, too clean. My husband, Ethan, front and center. My in-laws, Linda and Gary, beaming like this was a postcard they'd been waiting their whole lives to send. Ashley, Ethan's sister, squeezed in beside them. And then the kids. Kayla, Ethan's older daughter, and Ashley's two, Zoe and Carter, lined up like this was some perfect little family trip. Everyone crammed into the frame like a happy commercial for togetherness. Sunlight on their faces, wind in their hair, a slice of beach behind them so clear and blue it looked like a screensaver, and across it, bold like a joke that wanted applause. Family is everything. For a second, I couldn't speak, because my brain was trying to fit two realities together. My daughter standing in front of me, 10 years old, trying not to cry on her birthday, and my so-called family smiling at the beach and posting about togetherness like it was a personality trait. I felt Sophie's eyes on me, waiting for me to explain it, like I could translate cruelty into something that wouldn't hurt. I couldn't. My phone was already in my hand before I even realized I'd grabbed it. I started calling. Ethan first. Straight to voicemail. Linda next. No answer. Gary. No answer. Ashley. Ringing. Ringing. My fingers trembled once, and I hated that. Not because I was afraid, because I could feel the familiar shape of this dynamic trying to settle back onto my shoulders like a coat I never asked for. The part where I'd be expected to be calm, reasonable, forgiving. The part where Sophie would be expected to get over it. The part where everyone else got to do what they wanted and call it family. Ashley finally picked up. "Hello?" she said, in that bright tone people use when they already know what they're about to pretend not to know. "Ashley," I said. My voice was too steady. I didn't recognize myself. "Where are you?" There was a pause. Not a long one. Just the tiniest hesitation, like she was checking the script. "Oh," she said. "Hey." "Hey," I repeated. "Ashley, where are you? Why is my house empty? Why is Sophie standing here crying? Why are you posting pictures at the beach?" Another pause, and then I heard it. Faint at first. Other voices. A laugh. A shuffle. A quick, sharp, "Is that her?" The call wasn't just Ashley. It was a room. A group. A little audience. And then Ashley said, almost breezy, like she was explaining a change in dinner plans, "We decided to just go." My stomach turned. "What do you mean, you decided to just go?" I said. "Ethan said we were leaving together, at 1. "We didn't want to lose time," Ashley said, like time was a coupon that expired. "It was kind of a mess." I clenched my jaw. "A mess?" More background noise. A murmur. Someone talking over someone else. Then I heard Linda's voice cut in, louder, sharper. "She was misbehaving," Linda said. I froze. "What?" I said. Linda's voice again, and I could hear the certainty in it, the confidence of someone who's been believed for so long she doesn't even check if her words make sense. "Sophie was misbehaving," she repeated. I looked at my daughter standing beside me. Her cheeks were blotchy, her hands still tight around her phone, her eyes fixed on the floor like if she looked up she might break. I felt something in me go very still. "How," I said carefully, "could Sophie have been misbehaving when she was sleeping?" There was a beat of silence. Then Gary's voice, half grumble, half smirk. "She's difficult." Ashley chimed in too quickly. "It's always drama with you two, Sarah." And then Ethan's voice finally, like a late actor stepping onto stage. "Sarah," he said, tired and annoyed, like I'd called him to ask him to pick up milk. "Don't do this." "Don't do what?" I said, my voice rising. Don't ask why you left our daughter on her birthday? Here we go, Linda snapped. This is exactly what we didn't want. The drama. The scene. Sophie made a small sound beside me, like she was trying not to cry louder. I turned slightly, enough to block her view of my face without even thinking, like my body remembered how to shield her before my brain caught up. So your solution, I said into the phone, was to leave. Without us. Ashley let out a little laugh that made my skin crawl. If you really want, she said, syrupy now, you can still come. Like, just get in the car and join us later. Linda piled on, as if she were being generous. Yes, you can bring her later. We didn't want to wake her. You can come when you're ready. I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, because it was insane. They left us behind and were now offering participation like a favor. Like I should say thank you. Ethan's voice again, cooler now. We didn't want to lose the day because you were working in the morning. We can't just sit around waiting. You can join when you're done. I stared at Sophie's phone again, at the beach, at the smiles, at the caption. Family is everything, except when it's inconvenient, except when it's not the right family. I didn't shout. I didn't beg. I didn't even argue the way they expected me to, the way they could later frame as Sarah being dramatic. I just went quiet, because in that moment, something in me clicked into place so hard it felt like a lock turning. I ended the call without saying goodbye. Sophie flinched slightly at the sudden silence. I looked down at her. 10 years old. Birthday morning, holding back tears because adults had chosen to hurt her and then call it a decision. My chest hurt in a way I didn't have words for, but my voice when I spoke was steady. Go put your shoes on, I said gently, and pick what you want for breakfast. Anything. Sophie hesitated. Mom, are we? I cut her off softly because I wouldn't let her finish that question. Yes, I said. We're going to have a birthday. At the time, I didn't know it yet, but that was the day everything changed. 3 days later, their lives started to unravel. People love to pretend stories like this are simple, like there's one bad moment and then, boom, someone snaps. It's comforting. It lets people believe they'd spot the warning sign in time. It lets them believe the world makes neat little sense. But it's not one moment. It's 1,000 small ones. It's a pattern you learn to live inside until it feels like the walls of your own house. I met Ethan when his daughter Kayla was 2. She was tiny then, all soft curls and sticky fingers. Ethan had that brand new single dad charm down to a science. Tired eyes, warm smile. I'm doing my best energy. He talked about co-parenting like it was a badge of honor. He and Natalie were separated. They had Kayla 50-50, and on paper it sounded healthy, modern, responsible. And I'm not going to lie, watching him with Kayla made me fall for him faster. He was patient. He got down on her level. He listened to her like she mattered. He packed snacks. He remembered her favorite color. He did those little dad things that make you think, okay, this is a man who shows up. When he introduced me to Linda and Gary, I thought I'd lucked out. They were attentive. They fussed over Kayla constantly. Does she need her water? Is she cold? Do you want the blue cup, sweetheart? And I remember thinking, so clearly it almost hurts now. If they love Kayla this much, then when Ethan and I have our own child, our child will be so loved. It felt like a good sign. We fell in love. We got married. We had Sophie. And I waited for that love to expand. It didn't. It did something else. It narrowed. It stayed pointed in one direction, like a spotlight that refused to move. Kayla got older. She's 4 years older than Sophie. And the favoritism didn't fade. It sharpened. Linda and Gary treated Kayla like royalty. I mean it literally. Whatever Kayla wanted, Kayla got. A special dessert, a new outfit, a just because gift. Front seat privileges, the biggest slice, the loudest praise. Kayla was the golden child, the treasured one, the one everyone performed for. And Sophie? Sophie was tolerated. It started small enough that you could almost pretend it wasn't happening. Linda would show up with something for Kayla, an iced coffee for herself, a glossy little bag for Kayla, and then pat her purse like she'd just remembered a chore. "Oh, shoot! I forgot, Sophie," she'd say, smiling like it was cute. Or she'd make it up by handing Sophie something random she clearly grabbed at the last second. A keychain from a gas station, a half-melted chocolate bar from her coat pocket, a too-big shirt with a slogan Sophie didn't understand. Meanwhile, Kayla would get the thing she'd asked for, the exact thing, in the right color, with a bow. Gary was quieter about it, which somehow made it worse. He'd hold Kayla's drawing up like it belonged in a gallery. "Look at that! That's talent." Then glance at Sophie's and give a slow little nod like a disappointed teacher. He'd say. "Needs work." And if I raised an eyebrow, if I asked questions, I got the same answer every time. "Oh, Sarah, don't be so sensitive." Then it became words. "She's not as bright as Kayla. She doesn't behave as well. She's dramatic. She's difficult." And the worst part is how casually they said it, like it was a fact, like they were describing the weather. Sophie heard it. Kids always hear it. I tried to buffer it. I tried to counter it with praise, with love, with extra attention. But you can't outlove a room full of adults determined to make a child feel smaller. And then there was me. Because I didn't just become Sophie's mom, I became Kayla's stepmom. Kayla was with us half the time, and I wanted to do it right. I wasn't trying to replace Natalie. I wasn't trying to be mom. I just wanted to be a safe adult in the house, a person Kayla could trust. But Ethan and Linda and Gary made it very clear, without ever saying it directly, that I wasn't allowed to belong in that role. If I made a simple call, "Hey Kayla, it's bedtime," Linda would override me in front of her. "Oh, she can stay up a little longer." If I tried to enforce a basic rule, "Shoes off in the house," Gary would laugh and say, "Relax, she's a kid." If Kayla spoke rudely and I corrected her gently, Ethan would step in and say, "I've got it," like my voice was an intrusion. And sometimes they did it right in front of Kayla, with that tone that sounds harmless until you realize what it teaches. You don't have to listen to your stepmother. She's not your parent. Technically true. Emotionally poisonous. Because it wasn't about boundaries. It was about power. It was about keeping Kayla's loyalty pointed in one direction and keeping me in my place. Meanwhile, Linda and Gary would take Kayla out. Just Kayla. Ice cream dates, shopping trips, little special days. And Sophie and I would be standing there like, what? Background characters? Sometimes Sophie would ask, very quietly, "Can I come?" And Linda would smile like she was being kind while saying no. "Oh, honey, this is just for Kayla today." As if Sophie were a neighbor kid they'd accidentally made eye contact with. And the really sick thing? I tried anyway. I tried to keep the peace. I tried to build traditions. I tried to be pleasant. I tried to be easy. Because I thought if I didn't rock the boat, then maybe, eventually, they'd treat Sophie like she belonged. But boats like that don't want balance. They want someone in the water. Then came the move that changed everything in a quieter way. A few years ago, Ethan suggested Linda and Gary move in. "It'll help," he said. "They can do childcare. We have the spare room. Just temporary." Temporary. The word people use when they don't want you to hear permanent. We were working. We were busy. Money was tight in that we're fine way people say when they're not fine at all. And I didn't want the fight. I didn't want to be the villain who said no to family helping. So I agreed. And once Linda and Gary moved in, the house stopped feeling like mine. They acted like the space belonged to them, like they were doing us a favor by existing inside it, like Sophie and I were guests. The irony, if you want to call it that, was that the house was in my name. It came from my parents. The deed, the mortgage, the legal responsibility, mine. But Linda didn't care whose name was on paper. Linda cared who she could dominate in practice. And little by little, I became the person who paid the mortgage and then got corrected in her own kitchen. So when I stood there on Sophie's 10th birthday watching her hold back tears because the adults in her life had decided she was disposable, it didn't feel like a new betrayal. It felt like the clearest one. I looked at my daughter and made a decision. This was the last time I would let them make her feel like she wasn't enough. I didn't have time to collapse. That sounds dramatic, but it's true. There are moments where you can fall apart later, privately, when no one needs you. And there are moments where you don't get that luxury because your kid is standing in front of you on her birthday trying not to cry. Sophie didn't need a broken mom. She needed a mother who moved. So I moved. I looked at my phone, then at Sophie, then at the too bright beach photo again, and something in me snapped. Not into rage, but into action. Okay, I said, like I was accepting a challenge. Plan changed. Sophie blinked at me. Are we not going? No, I said, and I made sure my voice was firm. Not bitter. Not shaky. Firm. We're not chasing people who don't want us there. Her mouth trembled. But it's my birthday. I know. I crouched in front of her so she had to look at me. And you are not going to remember your 10th birthday as the day you got left behind. Got it? She nodded, but her eyes were still wet. So I stood up and started calling everyone I could think of with the kind of energy that probably scares telemarketers. First, my friends. Not the let's plan something next month friends. The if I call you at 10 in the morning and say I need you, you show up friends. Can you come over today? I asked. Like, today. There was a pause on the line, then, what happened? I told them fast. The abandoned birthday, the beach post, the phone call, the reaction was immediate. Oh, hell no. I'm coming. What do you need? Then, my parents. I called Mom and Dad, and I didn't even get through the hello before my voice cracked. And that was the only time I let it. I told them what happened. I told them Sophie was crushed. I told them I needed help. Mom's voice went dangerously quiet in that way only mothers can do when they're about to become a weather event. We're leaving now, she said. Mom, it's 2 hours. We're leaving now, she repeated. And Dad? Dad just said, calm as stone, we'll be there soon. I didn't ask twice. Then I went into full rebellion mode. Not the cozy, let's make the best of it mode. The furious, determined, you don't get to ruin her mode. I pulled out decorations we'd already bought for the trip. I ordered a cake like my life depended on it. I dug through drawers for candles. I turned music on loud enough that the quiet in the house couldn't sneak back in. Sophie hovered at first, unsure, still bruised by the morning. So I gave her jobs. Important ones. Pick the playlist, I told her. This is your day. Choose the frosting color. Decide the snacks. Little pieces of control. Little pieces of power. And slowly, the tension in her shoulders started to loosen. Friends started arriving with bags of chips, balloons, groceries, chaotic energy. One of them brought flowers like we were attending a funeral for Ethan's common sense. Another brought a ridiculous birthday crown and plopped it on Sophie's head like it was a coronation. "Birthday girl," she said. "You run this place." Sophie laughed. Small at first, then bigger, like she surprised herself. When Mom and Dad arrived, it felt like reinforcements. Not just emotionally, physically. The house filled up with people who were there on purpose. People who looked at Sophie like she mattered. Mom hugged Sophie so tight Sophie squeaked. Dad lifted her off the ground like she was still 5 and said, "Happy birthday, kiddo," like it was a promise. We took pictures, real ones, not performative family is everything ones where Sophie's smile reached her eyes again. And yes, somebody posted. Not because we needed likes, but because I wanted a marker in the world that said, we were here, we didn't disappear, we didn't get erased. By the time the candles were blown out, Sophie's cheeks were flushed from laughing, not crying. She leaned into me on the couch afterward, full of cake and sugar and relief. "Best birthday," she whispered, and I felt my throat tighten again. Not with sadness, with something sharper, because I knew what it had taken just to get her there. When Sophie finally went to bed that night, happy and exhausted, I sat at the kitchen table with my phone in my hand. The house was quiet again, but it wasn't the same quiet as the morning. This quiet felt like control. I stared at the screen for a long moment. Then I called Ms. Reynolds, a divorce lawyer, and I set up an appointment. They came back 3 days later. I knew exactly when, because I was supposed to be there with them. 3 days of beach photos and smug captions, 3 days of acting like Sophie's tears didn't exist. Mom and Dad stayed, not as guests, as support, as a boundary with a pulse. Sophie was not in the house when they returned. I'd arranged that. A friend picked her up for a play date because my daughter had already had enough adult ugliness for one birthday. She didn't need front row seats to what came next. By the time the car pulled into the driveway, I was calm. Not, "I'm okay," calm. The kind of calm you get when you've already decided the outcome and now you're just waiting for the scene to catch up. Mr. Lopez was there too, my divorce lawyer's process server, quiet and professional, folder in hand. The front door opened, and in walked Ethan, Linda, and Gary. Kayla wasn't with them. I assumed Natalie had her. They looked happy, sun-kissed, relaxed. Like the last 3 days had been a vacation in every sense, including the part where they'd left their problems behind. Ethan stepped in first, still half smiling, like he expected Sophie to come running out and pretend nothing happened. Linda followed, already scanning the room like she was checking for dust she could criticize. Gary came in last, carrying a bag like he owned the place. Then they saw Mom and Dad. Ethan's smile flickered. Linda's eyebrows shot up. Gary frowned, and then Ethan's eyes landed on Mr. Lopez. "What's this?" Ethan said, the smile now fully gone. Mr. Lopez didn't answer him directly. He just stepped forward and did his job. He handed Ethan a set of papers, divorce papers. Then he turned and handed Linda and Gary a separate packet, a 30-day notice to vacate. Linda took it like it might be contaminated. Gary snatched his like he could intimidate the ink off the page. Linda's face changed first, because Linda reads quickly when it involves her. "What is this?" she snapped, voice rising. "Who are you?" Mr. Lopez stayed calm. "Ethan, you've been served." Then, without changing his tone, "And Linda, Gary, this is a 30-day notice to vacate." Linda's mouth opened, closed, opened again. She looked at me like I'd personally set her hair on fire. "Sarah," she said, sharp, "what did you do?" Ethan looked up from his papers, his eyes narrowing, and he did exactly what I knew he'd do. He tried to make it my fault. "You're being dramatic," he said. I almost smiled. Of course. Of course that was his first instinct. Not, what happened? Not, why are there papers? Just, Sarah is dramatic. Sarah is throwing a tantrum. Sarah is the problem. A tantrum? I repeated, voice steady. You abandoned our daughter on her birthday. Linda scoffed. Oh, please. No, I said, cutting her off, and my tone made even Mom raise her eyebrows slightly. No, you don't get to oh please your way out of this. Gary stepped forward, face reddening. This is insane. This is our home, too. It's not, Mom said quietly from behind me, and that shut Gary up for exactly half a second. Ethan lifted the papers slightly like a shield. You're really doing this? He demanded. Over a trip? Over our daughter crying in her pajamas, I said. Over you leaving her behind and then telling me she was misbehaving while she was sleeping. Over you posting family is everything while she stood in this house trying not to sob. Linda's eyes flashed. She's dramatic, she snapped, like repeating it could make it true. Just like you. Ethan's jaw tightened. You're making a scene, he said, and then he added the part that always made my skin crawl. You're embarrassing yourself. I looked at him, and something in me felt almost relieved, because there it was. Clear. Clean. No confusion left. You need to leave, I said. Ethan blinked, like he hadn't expected that line to be said out loud. This is my house too, he snapped automatically. And technically, marital residence issues are complicated. But this wasn't a courtroom. This was a living room. This was a boundary. You can argue about two somewhere else, I said. Not here, Linda erupted. You can't do this to us. Gary started shouting about disrespect, about family, about after everything they'd done, like the act of existing in my space was a gift. Ethan's voice cut through it, louder now. Fine, he said sharply, and I saw it happen. The calculation. The pivot. The little moment where he decided leaving would be a weapon. Fine, he repeated. I'll go. Temporarily. He pointed at me like he was warning a child. But don't call me begging when you get over this tantrum, he said. Because you will. He grabbed his bag. Aggressive movements, all performance. Linda and Gary hesitated, looking between Ethan and my parents, and I could see the pride war in their faces. They didn't want to stay under my parents' gaze. They didn't want to sit in the house after being handed a notice to vacate like they were unwanted guests, because they were. Linda lifted her chin like she was a queen being exiled from a peasant's hut. We're not staying here, she snapped. Not with them. Gary muttered something about disrespect again, because it's his favorite hobby. They grabbed a few essentials, enough to make it dramatic, and Linda hissed, We'll be back for the rest. Sure, I said, and I meant, not on your timeline. They left. Not quietly, not gracefully, but they left. The front door shut, and the house went still. Not empty still, not the morning kind. This was a different stillness. This was the kind where, for the first time in a long time, I could breathe in my own home without waiting for Linda's criticism to land like a slap. Mom exhaled behind me. Dad's hand rested briefly on my shoulder, steady, grounding. Later, when Sophie came home, she ran into the living room and stopped short, eyes wide. Mom, she said carefully, where are they? I knelt and pulled her into my arms. Gone for now, I said into her hair. And you're safe. And for the first time since that beach post, I believed it. 6 months later, the house feels like mine again. Not in a symbolic way, in a real way. In the, I can put my keys down and they'll still be there way. In the, no one is stomping around my kitchen acting like I'm the help way. The divorce is done. The constant nagging is gone. The constant correction. The constant pressure to be smaller so everyone else can feel bigger. And financially, it's not magic, but it's better. Because here's the truth. I was paying that mortgage either way. What I wasn't doing anymore was carrying a house full of adults who treated me like an inconvenience while enjoying the roof my parents helped me keep over all our heads. Mom and Dad come over more now. They're retired. They have time. Sophie's different too. She laughs more. She walks through her own home like she belongs here. Like she isn't waiting to be compared to Kayla or Zoe or Carter or whoever the favorite is this week. Custody settled the way I didn't expect and still don't fully understand. Ethan has visitation. I have full custody, and he didn't fight that hard for more, which still stings, if I'm honest, because he fought for 50-50 with Kayla. He showed up there. He cared there. He made it matter. And with Sophie, my Sophie, it was like she was always second choice. I don't have a neat explanation for that. I probably never will. What I do have is my daughter's face now when she wakes up in the morning, relaxed, safe, unafraid. No more "family is everything" captions from people who abandon her. No more misbehaving accusations to justify cruelty. Just a home full of people who show up. So what do you think? Did I go too far? Or not far enough? Let me know in the comments and subscribe for more.